Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today's video covers one of my favorite topics, the difference between Canadian and American policing. Now, most people will look at a Canadian police cruiser and they will think that it is identical to its American counterparts. They may also look at the uniforms the same way. While I will be the first to admit that they have a lot of physical similarities, the philosophical ideas of policing are way different. We will look at overall police philosophy, equipment, contract policing, legislation, constitutional barriers, body cams, and some other differences to prove that Canadian and American policing could not be further from each other. Welcome to Canadian Policing Explained. First, before we get started, I just would like to ask that you subscribe and like this video as I'm trying to grow this channel. I started this channel with a vision to educate people on Canadian policing and legislation surrounding it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will answer it as soon as possible. So, first we need to look at the general philosophy behind both countries' police services. Canada is known for its community-based policing, while the States is known for its institutional-based policing. In Canada, release options like undertakings are exercised quite frequently, and a large portion of people facing charges are actually released on conditions immediately after the arrest takes place. In the United States, however, an offender is more likely to face time in jail until bail is posted. This type of mass incarceration has led to calls for reforms to the American prison system. In Canada, officers are usually required to do upwards of 1,100 hours of training, and some individual departments require even more. In the United States, however, police only need around 650 hours of training. As Canada is community-based, all of their services reflect the needs of their community. For example, lots of departments in Canada are setting up dedicated hate crime units that investigate anything from hate speech to racially motivated assaults. While it is important to note that these do exist in the United States, the scope of it tends to vary, and their units are usually smaller and not as well funded. In the United States, things like hate speech are more tolerable as our Constitution guarantees the right to free speech, whereas in Canada, our Constitution is much more limited and modern. Beyond this, Canadian policing agencies are more accustomed to community events. For example, the Ottawa Police contribute hundreds of hours to volunteering at food banks and park cleanups and public education events each year. They also have dedicated community policing stations that are not purposed towards criminal justice. Rather, they are established to serve the smaller needs of the community. An example of this service can be shown in the Ottawa Police Service's station count. The Ottawa Police Service has 24 stations in total, and only 5 of them actually function as a criminal justice outlet. The other 19 stations are actually designed to interact with community members and provide offices for community policing officers. In the United States, police stations are usually organized in a precinct arrangement. Most police stations have an offender intake area and house policing units within their walls. To sum this part up, Canada is physically more like an American police service, while their philosophy, the part that really matters, is more reflective of European standards. The last part I want to get into about philosophy today is that there is a higher expectation of professionalism on the job. Officers in Canada cannot voice their political opinions or other social opinions while in uniform or on duty. This has actually led to charges against officers. As an example, quite recently actually in Durham, Constable Erin Howard openly supported the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa while wearing her uniform and in her patrol car. After the video went viral, she was suspended and an investigation was opened into her conduct. She was ultimately charged with 2 counts of discreditable conduct, insubordination, and breach of confidence under Ontario's Police Services Act. Now that the philosophy is out of the way, we can move on to equipment. The United States and Canada are very similar in their approach to equipment. Police officers in both countries usually carry Glocks, long rifles, asp-batons, handcuffs, tasers, OC spray, and other useful tools. They also usually drive the same types of vehicles, like Ford Police Interceptor Utilities, Ford Police Interceptor sedans, Dodge Chargers, Chevrolet Tahoes, Dodge Durangos, Chevrolet Impalas, Ford Crown Victorias, and other vehicles like these. In Canada, tactical teams are a close equivalent to SWAT teams in the States. The main difference between these special tactics teams is their number of deployments. Canadian police deploy their tactical teams far less for smaller warrants and drug arrests. Canadian police also use armored vehicles just like the United States to protect them from gunfire, as this is just as much of a risk in Canada. Just to digress from the point temporarily, these armored vehicles are sometimes called militarized vehicles. This is a pet peeve of mine. This can sound scary to members of the public, but here is why it is really not scary. These police armored vehicles, like the Bearcat or the MRAP, do not have rocket launchers or 50 caliber machine guns. They are solely for the protection of officers and cannot be used from much of an offensive perspective. With this out of the way, let's move on to the next section. Now, just like in the United States, everywhere in Canada needs a police service. It is very common to see a 3-person department in the States, where it is unlikely to see a department of 80 officers or less in Canada. This is because of something called contract policing. The RCMP is contracted by over 150 communities in Canada that would not be able to justify and/or afford their own municipal police service. The RCMP is Canada's largest federal police service, but they act as a provincial and municipal, more than they actually act as a federal agency. The two exceptions to this is Ontario and Quebec, since they have their own provincial services to contract police in their communities. So, what is contract policing in general? Well, it is very complicated, and I plan to make an entire video on this topic. But to put it in the simplest terms for the purpose of this video, it is essentially a contract between a municipal or provincial government with the federal government that allows the RCMP to patrol it for a monetary exchange. This also exists in the United States, but a very small portion of United States citizens are living in a contract police territory. While this solution does have its benefits in Canada, it also has a very, very dark history. Throughout Canada's history, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has been responsible for the forceful seizure of Indigenous children to assimilate them, seizure of Indigenous land, and forceful relocation and cultural genocide. I will be doing a full video on the RCMP's history of systemic racism in Canada towards Indigenous people later on. Now, for those hardcore supporters of policing, this may be a hard pill to swallow. However, it is not a theory of systemic racism, but more so a proven fact. Lots of people get thrown into a defensive mode when they hear the term systemic racism because it has been so politicized. I'm not saying that the RCMP is terrible and racist in its current state, but its history 100% is. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police forced Indigenous children into Catholic-ran residential schools where thousands were beaten, raped, and murdered. They started a campaign of terror by shooting over 10,000 sled dogs belonging to Inuit citizens throughout the mid-1900s. There is also several accounts of murders by RCMP police officers on Indigenous peoples ranging all the way back to 120 years ago. This is Canada's darkest shame, and one that requires the new RCMP to rededicate themselves to all Canadian citizens, and this comes with its own PR troubles as well. This has caused a lot of debate over contract policing in Canada. In terms of legislation and constitutional barriers, there are lots of those in Canada. Police in Canada are strictly governed by provincial acts outlining specific and strict rules with respect to their job. They also face a herd of constitutional boundaries that they must respect. Every aspect of Canada's criminal justice system is constitutionally designed and interpreted to benefit the defendant until they are proven guilty beyond any reasonable doubt. Now, this is actually quite similar to American policing and their justice system in that way. However, Most constitutional police practices in the United States are based around interpretations made by their Supreme Court. This means that, generally speaking, the rights of defendants in Canada are much stronger. Now, body-worn cameras are a hot topic in North American society. In fact, over 90% of citizens in both countries believe that police should wear them on a regular basis. In about 5 years, the United States has outfitted most of their police officers with body cameras. A lot of this footage is also publicly available through sites like YouTube or a simple footage release request. In fact, 80% of America's large departments have outfitted their officers with body cameras. In Canada, most police officers actually do not wear body cameras. And this is not because Canadian police are more trusted, but because of a number of legal and logistical hurdles. Firstly, so much of Canada is covered in snow for 6 months of the year. This can cause malfunctions in the cameras. Some places in northern Canada get to under minus 50 degrees Celsius, which, for reference for our American friends, is about minus 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Beyond this, Canada has very strict privacy laws. Police are required to do certain things while wearing the cameras and may even have to turn them off at the request of an involved party. This has not stopped departments like Toronto and Durham from adopting them, though. The other thing with body cams is that the public will probably only see a few videos released in their lifetime due to very strict Canadian privacy laws. So, have you ever wondered why there aren't very many policing shows based in Canada? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. And that's basically because privacy laws are super strict in Canada, and having a camera crew following around police officers on calls to service is a big no-no in Canadian privacy laws. With your newfound knowledge of the difference in these two countries' police services, what do you think? Tell us in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching Canadian Police Explained. If you happen to have footage of a Canadian policing incident that you would like to have broken down, please send us an email at canadianpolicingexplained@gmail.com. We will have more episodes coming out, so stay tuned, folks. Toodles!